congratulations on Never Too Late, which I thought was a very sweet, congenial film for a slightly older skewed audience, which is actually doing quite well at the Australian box office given the COVID-19 conditions. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's a delight, really. We had actually screen tested the movie with audiences, so we knew it played really well for audiences. And we'd also had a very small release. Palace Cinemas did a 2-week release just before COVID hit, as part of a film festival for like older audiences, and it was #1 at the box office there. So we had a feeling that, like it had the potential to draw an audience. But then, of course, when COVID hit and we delayed our initial release, and then we had this much later release, I was thinking, but to my delight and surprise, it's doing well and drawing audiences in, which is a really lovely feeling.
And the film is doing quite well. Do you say that with particular reference to your previous film, A Few Less Men, which I actually thought was quite funny, and I presume you did too, and your editor, but apparently we were the only three.
Yep, it was the three of us. But apparently not, actually. I was recently speaking to the producer who said, actually, and I said, pity about that. And he was like, no, actually it did really well in English-speaking Africa and across Eastern Europe. And they're two significant markets. So he said, no, you had a hit film. I was like, okay, well, thank you very much. I'll take that and run with it.
Well, let's just get this clear for the record, because one of the stars of Never Too Late, Shane Jacobson, was in a film called The Barbecue, which was absolutely slated by the critics and which was regarded as being a flop because it didn't do too well in its run at the box office. However, I spoke to the director about another film that he had made, and he said, no, that film actually came into the black. It actually ended up doing very well once you considered all the other markets. So that film actually was a success. So in fairness to that film, I said, okay, let's get this on the record. It's a success. For the record, A Few Less Men actually got its dosh back.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, so that's good. I mean, comedy is always a tricky area to go into, and A Few Less Men was a particularly kind of, a lot of the critical response was, oh, it's so lowbrow. Well, it was a penis and fart joke film. I mean, I don't know what, it was in a funny kind of way. It was like Carry On. It was like a Carry On movie across the Australian outback. It's supposed to be silly and lowbrow, and you obviously, Jim, evaluated it for what it was, but a lot of people don't, or a lot of critics don't. Anyway, they expect everything to be, a work of art that elevates and whatever. And that was never going to happen with that movie.
Now, as you know, a good comedy film has got a lot of stuff bubbling underneath the surface. So I just want you to describe for me what you think is actually bubbling underneath the comedy veneer of Never Too Late, which is quite a broad, sweet comedy film. But what do you think is actually driving it and perhaps has accounted for its appeal?
Well, I do think it's interesting that it's a story of four guys who are cooped up together in an institution that they can't get out of, and that they break out of it. And then that's certainly going to have resonances with a contemporary audience who have all been just stuck inside with COVID and not able to get out. So I think that part of the appeal is that connection with each other. But I think also it's, the trick of the film really is in the title, Never Too Late. And that's the big message of the title, that it's never too late to realise your dreams, to go and, try and find your way, no point giving up until you're dead kind of thing. And it can be perceived as a message for older people, but I think also it's just a message for everybody, really. Just keep doing your best, keep on keeping on until you can't. But the only time you can't is when you're dead, So I think there's sort of a very broad, resonant message there for audiences as well.
When you're directing a comedy like this with a very, very well-known cast, tell me how disciplined you are in the market that you're going for and the kind of things that you will do and the kind of things that you won't do. Just I'm interested in the discipline you apply as a director when shaping a film like this.
Well, that's an interesting question. Obviously, we were so the way that when Luke Preston sent me that script and I read it, and we kind of then shaped it back and forth. But basically, what you see on the screen is pretty much in the shape that Luke sent it to me. But so one of the things that struck me immediately about it was that it is for an older audience, and it's that classic 50 plus kind of group. And I wanted with this to not. It felt to me there were elements of it which needed to be very authentic, that it couldn't be so broad as to be unreal in its feeling, if you know what I mean. So I wanted the actors to play it not for the laughs but for the truth of the moment always. So we were very careful about that, and that wasn't really very much of an argument with the actors in the sense that that was all their instinct too. So we were all immediately on the same page about the level of performance. And then I guess the things that I wouldn't do in a thing like this is sort of, in fact, we didn't do any penis and fart jokes basically in this film, as opposed to the last one. And that's largely because I just think it's in a sense, although it's a comedy, it's about quite serious things. It is also about aging and disempowerment. There are a whole lot of issues there that I wanted to be respectful of. And that doesn't mean that you can't laugh about them, but I think you've got to kind of take the comedy seriously, if you know what I mean. And that's that's what we did here.
I'm very keen to know whether you were drawing on the experiences of your cast, who are all of advanced age but also have huge experience on screen, whether they were feeling any of the things that the characters were.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think why we attracted such a great cast in the first place was that they all opened that screenplay and went, I've been there to some extent, or I've got a friend that's been there. I mean, it was all the sense of growing invisibility as you get older, the sense of disempowerment, all that kind of stuff, even as actors. I mean, even, the great Jackie Weaver, who's on this amazing kind of, skyrocket through the sky. I think all of those people have had a sense of those kinds of disempowering things that happen to you when you get older, but also equally, they're all still in the game, they're all still doing it. So they also have that spirit of, let's keep going, let's keep knocking this dead kind of thing, So I think those things sort of certainly resonated with them, and they were able to deliver that then on the screen. Another interesting thing that happened for them was, which was just lucky for me, is that they all become great friends. They really enjoyed each other. They just clicked. And often when we were filming, I'd hear these sort of peals of laughter off set, and I'd sort of go around a corner and they'd all be huddled in their little director's chairs telling, war stories from their experiences of 50 years making movies. And of course, we filmmakers are fans too, and really I often just wanted to pull up a chair and listen to the stories, but I couldn't. I had to, run around and be a director. But what was great about that was this wonderful connection they had with each other, and I really believe then that translated into performance, and that you see that on the screen as well, which was a delightful added extra, because as you know, Jim, you don't always get that with actors. They don't always get on. So it was a lovely thing that they did.
Right. Now, you got a US deal for this movie, did you not?
Yes, we did. Yeah, we did get a US deal, which was great. I mean, partly I think because of the casting of Jamie Cromwell, who is a Academy Award nominated actor and hugely respected. So, and Jackie Weaver. I mean, they're those two names mean something to American box office. So I think people stand up and take notice when you've got two people like that on board. And of course then there's a very rich Australian cast. Not to underestimate the amazing Jack Thompson and so on and so forth. But yeah.
And can you just tell me, just with your hand on your heart, if you have noticed a difference when it comes to selling a film between Australia and America? Americans love their package deals, and they do love brand recognition, and they like big names. Do you think that they have a tendency to make deals based on those elements rather than the actual film itself? What do you think?
I can. That's all they're interested in. Yeah, they want to know who's in it and what the package is. It's not really about how wonderful the film is. I'm sure there are many wonderful Australian films that have just gone, under the radar because they haven't had the kind of star power. Part of the reason why I was very keen to get some serious star power in this film was just that. Not necessarily that I felt like the screenplay needed it, but I knew from experience that if you and I've seen this even with the press in Australia, the level of interest in this film because of the star power in it is just much greater. I think every single morning television show did an interview with one or other of our stars because they're all interview worthy on morning breakfast television. It's something that you don't get normally, and there's just not normally that level of interest. And star power delivers you just that, and in America in particular, that's exactly what it's about.
Mark, do you mind if I ask you about some of the books that you've written and if you've actually moved to adapt any of them for the screen? The Full Ridiculous, for instance, sounds like terrific middle-aged comedy drama material.
Yeah, it is. No, I haven't actually. I write novels sort of for a different reason. I mean, obviously, I like telling stories, and so that's a different way to tell a story. I find sorry if this is a bit long-winded, but I find filmmaking is an incredibly collaborative process. You've got producers and writers and actors and marketing people and all kinds of people who are inputting into what you are doing as a director and a writer-director. And it's the effort of collaboration, just kind of managing all of that input, I find great, but extremely draining. And so I kind of discovered writing novels as a way of doing something that's just me, that's just channeling something out of the universe and putting it on a page, and it's just my voice, and I don't, obviously I have to, I get notes from an editor eventually, but it's a much purer expression of sort of my storytelling. It's almost like a therapy for me doing those sort of things. So when it comes to converting them into screenplays, I'm just not that interested. I feel like I've done that. I'd probably like to direct them. I'd like somebody else to write the screenplays of the novels, but to do it myself, I feel like I've got other novels, I've got other stories that I want to tell that are coming down the pipeline. I don't want to spend the 2 or 3 years at least focusing on a book that I've already written, trying to turn it into a screenplay. It's just, I don't have the time, I guess.
I'd like to know where you see yourself at the moment with your filmmaking career, what's motivating you, and what there is still to achieve, something still that you want to do with Australian film.
Where am I? Well, I guess I'm very happy being. As I was talking to my agent the other day, she said you're turning into the king of kind of geezer comedy, and I am very happy to be in the comedy space. It's a very tricky space to be in. Dying is easy, comedy is hard. This is absolutely true. It's interesting because generally, critically, people don't like comedy. I mean, critics don't like comedy, so you don't get that sort of support. So that's a bit tricky. So working in this space, I'm kind of having to work. It's a sort of a very isolated thing. I know, though, if I can get my films to audiences with enough star power in them, then audiences will appreciate them. And this is sort of what's happening at the moment. So I suppose I hope to continue in this vein, working in Australian film and also working internationally. I'm not necessarily limited to Australia. In fact, I did have a gig lined up in London just before COVID hit. They were supposed to be shooting something in September. That didn't happen, but it was in fact another geezer comedy, which is a nice space to be in. But I'm doing another film with Shane Jacobson, which is a family film, for example, but it's a comedy. So it's the comedy space that attracts me. And I think Australia has been traditionally poor at it, but I think we're getting better and better at it. And the way I do that is by relentlessly audience testing and playing a film for an audience, taking it back, fixing it up, playing it, taking it back, fixing it up, because comedy's simple, it's scientific. If they're not laughing, it's not funny. So you go back and you fix it up and you work with it and you come back. So that's what I hope to do, is to continue to improve that space, I suppose. That's my ambition.
In America, test screening is part of the law of making comedy films. Some very well-known comedy directors will not make a film unless they know it's going to be tested. In Australia, we have almost no test screening processes. Do you think we should have much more test screening for all films in Australia?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I think test screenings are the way to go, because here's the thing. As a director, it's too late when you're sitting in an audience going, oh, that line bombed, or that moment bombed, or they didn't think that emotional, or they're laughing at that emotional moment. It's too late when you're sitting in an audience in a finished film, watching, your film not hit the notes you want it to hit. You can sit in a test audience and watch your film with them and go, oh, okay, so that's not working. That is working. I mean, it's tough. It's heartbreaking, but I think we as filmmakers need to be less fragile and to listen to that audience feedback, because this is why we're making movies. We're not making to sort of sit alone in a dark room by ourselves. We're making for it to resonate to a broader audience. And so I think absolutely test audiences are the way to go.